Hey guys, in this video, I'll be teaching you how to create a Pomodoro timer using Vue.js. We're going to have custom animations, the ability to pause and resume the timer, as well as a cool little confetti effect when we finish all our Pomodoro sessions. All of this is going to be built within a clean and simple single-page app. Now, before we get started with building the app, I want to make sure that the beginners out there can follow along. I'll be using VS Code. You can use Sublime Text, Atom, or any other text editor you want. If you already have these set up, feel free to skip ahead. I'll be leaving timestamps below so you can skip ahead to the parts that you need to watch. Okay, so if you're new to programming in general, I'll guide you through an extremely simple setup. So the first thing that we're going to download is Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code or VS Code is basically just a text editor. So you can use things like Notepad++, Sublime Text, Atom, but honestly, VS Code is the way to go. It has a bunch of extensions and it's extremely simple to use. So you're going to download the one for your operating system. So just download it, install it with everything kept at default. And then the next thing that we're going to download is Node.js. All of the links will be in the description below, but Node.js is going to come with a tool called npm, and we're going to need npm whenever we're installing packages for the projects that we create. So one of the packages that we will be using is Progressbar.JS. So once again, download according to your operating system. And once that's done, we're going to open up Visual Studio Code and you're going to hit Ctrl-tilde. And you can see that there's probably a tip right here that says toggle terminal or open terminal. So you're going to hit Ctrl-tilde and you're going to type node-v. And if you see the version that you just installed, that means you're good to go. You're also going to type npm-v just to check that you have npm installed. Okay, right now we're going to install an extension, and that extension is going to be called Viter. So if you just search for Viter and click on this square icon right here, you're going to click on the first one by PineWoo, and you're going to make sure that you hit install. So Viter is a very helpful extension that we can use for syntax highlighting, error checking, and giving us cool little snippets that we can use whenever we're typing our Vue.js code. Okay, now we can close this up. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install Vue CLI. So Vue CLI comes with a very cool tool called Vue UI. And it's basically just a very user-friendly and interactive way to create your projects. So instead of using the command line interface to create your projects, you could use Vue UI. So we're just going to paste the command in and hit enter. This is probably going to take about a minute or two to install. So feel free to just grab a cup of coffee or tea and come back when it's done. Okay, once that's done, you should see that everything works and there should be no errors. Now we can go ahead and type Vue UI. So you can see it's going to say starting GUI, and then it's going to open up a web page where we can see our Vue project manager. So currently we have no existing projects, but we're going to go ahead and create a project. So I'm going to use my folder called projects. You can use any folder that you want, and then we're going to create a project. And now we can give our project a name. So I'm going to call it Vue Pomodoro. You can leave the package manager as default. I'm just going to select npm just to be sure, and then hit next. We're also going to use Vue 2 and not Vue 3. Now you can hit create project, and this is going to take another minute to set up. Another thing that I want to point out right now while it's still installing is that if you ever run into issues from PowerShell, what you can do is click here and hit select default shell. And then what you're going to do is type cmd. So PowerShell sometimes gives errors because of policy issues, but cmd should just ignore all of those. Okay, so we can see that our project has been created and we're in this project dashboard screen. So here we can install plugins, we can add Vue Router or Vuex. So Vuex is a state management tool and Vue Router is a tool that we can use to create multi-page applications. But for now, we're not going to use any of those. So we can actually just close this and go back to VS Code and hit Ctrl-C within the terminal. So this is going to quit everything And now we can actually go into this folder. You can type cd Vue Pomodoro, and now we can see that we're in this folder right here. Okay, so we just set up our Vue project, and you can see that it's actually really simple. I know for new users, using the command line interface might be a little bit daunting. So using Vue UI is a great way to basically achieve the same thing, but in a user-friendly way. All right. The next thing I just want to show you guys is the GitHub Repo. So if you're ever lost or you can't catch up with what I'm doing, you can just go ahead to the Vue Pomodoro repo and just refer to the code right here. So I've split it into 3 different parts. Each part has its own branch. So if you're going to click into part 1, you can see that everything here is for part 1. So now we have all of the setup done and out of the way, we can finally take a look at what we will be building. So I've created a Figma Mockup just to design and think about how the UI would turn out. So we're going to have a title called Pomodoro and then just an emoji of a tomato. Now for Windows, you'll probably see some really ugly emoji. I'll show you guys what I mean. So if you just Google tomato emoji and click on the link by Emojipedia, you will probably see something like this pop up whenever we paste the emoji into our code. So the way that you want to avoid that, if you want to use the Apple style that looks way cleaner, what you can do is just right click on this and hit save image as, and you're going to save it as a .png. But don't worry about that, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the prototype. So we have a title, it's called Pomodoro, and then we have a timer, and each one of these are actually progress bars. So we have 4 sessions with a break in between. And then we just have a button that says start or pause whenever it's running, and then we can resume as well. So this is what it's going to look like when we are resting. So you can see that we have a progress bar that has been depleted, and this is what it looks like when it's, halfway through. So this is just a simple mock-up. There's just 3 screens. It's nothing much that we need to do. And now that we've taken a look at the design, we can finally start programming. Okay, so open up VS Code again, and we're going to go to our source folder. We're going to open up app.vue, and within our components, we're going to delete hello world, and we're going to delete the logo in the assets folder. So in app.vue, now we can delete both of this. And for now, let's just create a h1. So just type h1, hit enter, and then we're going to say test. We're going to remove the import because we deleted it, and there are no components right now that we are importing. And for this, let's just delete it right now. Hit save. And now down here in the terminal, make sure that you're under the folder Vue Pomodoro, and you're going to hit npm run serve. So this is going to start the development server, and it's going to open up a web page under localhost 8080. So if we navigate right there, we should see the word test. So obviously this is not the font that we're using, and this is not how the background should look like. So let's start by installing our fonts. So the font that we're going to use is Lobster, and you can get Lobster from Google Fonts. So just click right here, select style, click import, and you're going to copy this right here. Oops, right here. And I'm going to go back to VS Code, and what you're going to do is paste it right under the style tag. Now we're going to create a global style, so we can denote it by the asterisk, and we're going to say margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, border box, font family. We're going to use Lobster, which is the font that we just imported up here. Cursive. Oops, cursive. And then the color that we're going to use is hashtag F85959. Awesome. And then, so now we can save it, and you should see everything reload at the bottom. And if we go back to our website, you should see that our heading is now in the correct font. Okay, so our background is still white, but you can see here that our background is kind of like a white, like light yellow color. So we're gonna change the color under our hashtag app. So here we're gonna say background hashtag FFF8EE. And then when we save and go back, we should see that it is now in a light yellow color, but it's not taking up the whole screen. So what should we do? We can now create a component. That component is going to be called home.view under the components folder. And what you're going to do is type view. So the first thing that's going to pop up is view with default.view, hit enter. And here under export default, you're going to say name home. So it's generally a good idea to give your component a name that's the same as what you name the file as. And right here, we're just going to create a container. So all you need to do is type .container, and when you hit enter, it's going to create a div with a class of container. So what we can do now is type h1, and we're going to use the same text as what we did in app.view. Now we can remove it, and we can finally import home from /components/home.view. And once you imported it, you have to define it under the components property as well. So we're gonna say home, and now here we can just call it home. So let's save it for now, and let's see what's our output. So everything is still the same. There's nothing that changed. So to make it fill from top to bottom, what we're gonna do is we're gonna define a custom style for our container. So .container, we're gonna give it a height of 100 VH. 100 VH basically just means 100 viewport height. So it's gonna go all the way from the top to the bottom. So if we save it right now, you can see that everything is now light yellow. There's no longer any white spots. And as long as we keep everything within this screen, then everything should be okay. So now let's take a look back at our design and let's see what are we missing. So obviously we need a title, we need a timer, and we need the button. So let's just create all of that right now. So within our container, we're going to create a title. So for our title, we're going to use a div with an ID of title, and we're going to give it a h1 within it. We're going to type Pomodoro. And what I'm going to do is actually just copy and paste this emoji right here. So if you ever run into issues where this emoji would show up as a question mark in your website, all you need to do is use the Unicode. So back in our Emojipedia website, all you can do is scroll all the way down here and copy this code point. So you can just omit the U plus and just copy 1F345. Go back here, type and hashtag X, and then paste everything and semicolon. When you save it, you're actually going to see the emoji pop up. So this is using Unicode instead of pasting the entire emoji in. Now, if you're on Windows, you'll probably see this ugly emoji right here. And like I mentioned before, just right click, hit save image as, and just make sure to save it under your project folder, source, and assets. Hit save, and we can close this, go back to VS Code. You should see this right here. So the way that we're going to use it is just simply type image, and the source is going to be /assets/tomato.png, and we can give it an alt of tomato. Now we hit save, go back to our site. You should see the tomato icon show up. Okay, so everything is really huge right now. It's out of proportion. It's not according to our design. So let's fix all of that. So the first thing we're going to do is give our container a property of display flex and flex direction column. So flex direction column is going from top to bottom, and then align items, not align content, align items center. So that should align everything to the middle, as you can see. And then now for our title. So our title is an ID, so we're using hashtag title. We're going to give it a margin top of about 50 pixels. And we're going to say display flex direction row. Save that. Now you should see that it's in a line rather than going top to bottom. Now the proportions are still off, so what we need to do is change our H1 to give it a font size of 64 pixels. And we're going to give it a color of hashtag C44747. So this is going to give it the darker color, which is according to our design. And now our emoji is still really huge. So what we can do is give it a width of, let's say, 64 pixels. Let's just save that for now. Okay, yeah, that works, but as you can see, it's kind of squished and the whole proportions are just kind of weird. So we're going to give it a height of 64 pixels as well. Hit save and it should look, well, yeah, it looks pretty good. We just need to give some spacing. So we can do that under our H1. We're going to give it a margin right of about 10 pixels. And our title, we're actually going to say align items center. That should align it top to bottom in a straight line rather than having it one up, one down, stuff like that. Okay, so we have our title now. Let's create our timer and let's create our button. So we're going to create our timer under a class called timer. And then right under there, we're going to have a button that says start. Let's save that just to make sure that everything looks okay. Okay, yep. So our timer is still empty, which is why we don't see anything, but at least we have our button right there. Okay, so let's think about our timer for now. So how are we going to align everything so that it looks like a circle, like a timer, and we're going to have a text right here in the middle. So the way we're going to do that is to create a container, which in this instance is .timer, and we're going to make it position relative. So if you give it position relative and make everything position absolute and align it to the top right, bottom left, and top left, and this timer display into the center, then, well, we basically achieve the same effect. So let's do that right now. So this is going to be position relative. The margin top is going to be 100 pixels. The width is going to be 330 pixels. And then the height is going to be the exact same. So these values, I've just been playing around and found that this one works the best. And then we can save it just to make sure that it's working. Okay, so we have this empty space right here. And now we need to fix this button. Let's give our button a style. We're going to say margin top 50 pixels, width 200 pixels, height 68 pixels, background hashtag F85959, border radius 20 pixels, border none, cursor pointer. And that's going to be our base style for the button. But you can see that our text now blends in with the background. So we got to fix our text. So first, let's give it a font size of 36 pixels, line height of 45 pixels. This is honestly unnecessary. You could just delete it, but I'm just going to keep it in. Text align center, color hashtag FFF8EE. So this is the same color as our background so that we can see it right here. Okay, So if we click on it right now, you can see that there is this blue outline, or if you're on Windows again, it's going to be a black outline. And this is kind of ugly, right? We don't want this to happen every time we click on it. So the way that we can handle it is by saying button focus outline none. So this means that every time when we click on the button, there's going to be no outline. Hit save. Now we click on it again, you can see that there is no outline. Okay, so now let's go and create our timer. So I've created SVGs for that timer, and it's all under the components home.vue in GitHub. So you do not need to type all of this out. So we can just copy and paste. So let's go up here into our timer and just paste everything in. Okay, so if we hit save and go back, we should see everything right here. But obviously, everything is kind of jumbled up right now. It's not aligned properly. So let's just take a look at our SVGs and look at what we're dealing with. So we have SVGs with an ID. So this one's first segment, this one's second segment, third, and fourth. But within each SVG, we actually have two paths. So the first path is actually the background, and that background is this darker yellow color. And the second path with an ID, that one is the red color. And we're going to need an ID right here because we're going to use Progressbar.JS. And after this, you're going to see why we need this custom ID. Okay, so for now, let's just define custom styles just to align everything properly. So the first one is the first segment. So like I mentioned previously, we're going to say position absolute, and then we're going to say top 0, right 0. So this is going to align everything to the top right. So if we go back here, you can see, boom, there you go, top right. Now we can do the exact same thing for all our other segments. So let's change this to second segment, and this is going to be bottom right. And then we can see our third segment, and this is going to be bottom left. And then finally, our fourth segment, that's going to be top left. So if we save it right now and go back, you can see that everything is aligned properly. The only thing left is this display right here. And that display, we can just leave it right under our last SVG. So we can just collapse all of this just so that we do not get everything cluttered up. So let's collapse all of this. And here we're going to create a H2 tag, and we're going to say 25 minutes for now. So hit save, go back here, you can see it right here, but it's not in the middle. So how do we solve this? Well, we can just give it a position absolute property as well. So we're going to say position absolute, and we're going to say we want it 50% from the top and 50% from the left. And if we save it right now, you can see that it's not actually aligned in the center. What we need to do is actually transform, translate, and we're going to go back 50% from that 50%. So that's like going back 25%. And that's actually going to push it right back to the middle. So that's just a neat little trick that you can use every time when you're trying to center something with position absolute. Okay, so now we can fix the font size. So the font size here is 64 pixels. And we're going to have a color of hashtag F85959. Okay. So now if we go back, we should see everything line up pretty nicely. Awesome. So now we finally have all of the design done. We can start by implementing some of our features. So the package that we're going to use is Progressbar.JS. And if you look at the API references, you can see that we have a progressbar.line, circle, and semicircle, but we don't have a quarter circle, right? So that's where we need to use our progressbar.path. So progressbar.path allows us to create custom shaped progress bars. So we've defined our custom SVG. So now we can use progressbar.path to define our own custom shaped progress bar. Okay, so what you're gonna do is go back to VS Code, open up a new terminal, and you're gonna say npm install. Just make sure that you're in the Pomodoro folder first, and you're gonna say npm install progressbar.js. Once that's installed, and what we can do is go up here right under our script tag, and we're gonna enter import progressbar from progressbar.js. Now under our export default, we're going to create a new property. It's going to be called mounted, and it's going to be a function. And this function is going to run every time the component is mounted. So mounted is just a lifecycle hook, kind of like React lifecycle hooks. And for now, we're just going to test out the animation for the progress bar. So let's create a variable. We'll call it top right. So this is going to be a new progress bar dot path, and path with P capital. And we're going to say hashtag top right. So this hashtag top right, this ID is actually referring to this first top right path under our first segment. So once we've done that, we can put in our path options. So we're going to give it a property of easing linear, and duration for now, let's just make it 1 second. So the duration is in milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds is equivalent to 1 second. We're going to hit save, and we're going to go back. So we're going to see that we have a small error here that says top right is assigned a value but never used. What we can do is just say top right dot set 1. Okay, so you can see that nothing has changed, but actually what we did here is we created a progress bar and we set the value to 1, aka full. So we could just change this to 0.5, save it, and you can see it's halfway depleted. And basically what we're going to do is leave it as 1, but whenever we hit the button start, we want it to animate from full all the way down to 0. And the way we do that is by saying top right dot animate, and we're going to hit 0, semicolon, save it. And now you can see if we refresh it that it animates down to 0 in 1 second. So if you change this to like 25 minutes times 60 and we hit save, you can see that it's going really slow. You can see that it's not moving at all. We just zoom in right there, you can see it's going in really slowly. But yeah, that's basically what we are going to do. So obviously we do not want it to start animating right at the start. So let's just delete that for now. And we now at least know that our progress bar is working. So let's start hooking up everything. This 25-minute right here is hard-coded, and we do not want that. So we're going to create a data, and this data is going to be a function. So you could say function like this, or you could do this. So this is the ES6 version. So actually, we could just change this to the ES6 version as well. So under data, we're going to return, and we're going to say Pomodoro duration. And we're going to say 25 minutes. Now, obviously, if we are just going to change this to Pomodoro duration, it's just going to say 25, and that's not really a good way of displaying our time. So what we're going to do is create a computed property that's going to take the current time in seconds and then split it up to the minutes and seconds like we see right here. So we can just go ahead and create a computed, and here we're going to call our computed property time display. Now before we start doing anything here, we're going to create a new property, and that's going to be called current time in seconds. The reason is because we do not want to use our Pomodoro duration and reduce it, because when we want to go back to 25 minutes, we have nothing to refer to. So the current time in seconds is just going to take Pomodoro duration times 60. And if we hit save right now, you're going to see that we have an error where Pomodoro duration is not defined. That's because you can't actually refer to another property that's being returned by the data within the same return statement. So what we're going to have to do is pull that out and say const Pomodoro duration is equal to 25. And if we hit save right now, you can see that that error has disappeared. But now we have another error with time display, which we will fix right now. So under time display, I'm going to say const minutes is equal to parse int this dot current time in seconds, and we're going to just divide 60. So the reason why we cast it to int is because we do not want it to have any decimal points. And then for our seconds, we're going to do this dot current time in seconds modulo 60. And now what we want to do is actually pad the time. Just in case if it's 5, we do not want it to say 500, but 0500. So we have a really simple way of achieving this. We can just add 0 and then the minutes, and then we slice to get the first 2 characters, like so. And then we can do the exact same for padded seconds and changing this to seconds as well. Now finally, we can return, we're using template literals. I'm going to say padded minutes, padded seconds. Hit save. Now let's change this to time display. And when we hit save, we should see that we are back with 25 minutes. And if we change it to something like 12 and hit save, you should see this reflect as 12. And if let's say it's 12.5, it's going to be 12:30. Okay, so we have our time display set up. The next thing that we're going to do is hook up the start button functionality, as well as define all of our progress bar paths. So let's just copy and paste each one of these. And here we're going to say bottom right, and this is going to be bottom right as well. And then this is going to be bottom left, bottom left, and then this is top left. And don't forget to change this one as well, right down here. And now if we hit save, we should see that everything is still the same. Okay. Now this is getting pretty redundant. We're repeating the same thing again and again. And if we ever want to change this just to test, we're going to have to change it for all 4. So what we can do is create a property that says path options, and then just paste everything in here like that. And then just refer to it as this dot path options. Now let's copy this. Let's select this whole object and hit Command or Control D. And you can see that we can actually select everything that is exactly the same. And now if we paste it in, we can instantly just change everything to this path options. There you go. Now let's create a function for our buttons to control this animation. The way we do that is by creating a methods property under our Vue component. And in here, we're going to create a method called handle button click. And for now, let's just console log hi. So we're going to go up here and we're going to say add click handle button click. Hit save. And if we go and check our console, let's just refresh just to clear everything up and hit start. You should see hi get logged in the console. Now we have some errors right here. Cannot read property path options of undefined. So let's try to figure out what's going on. So my guess is that this is not loading when this is being called, but let's just forget about it for now. Let's solve our button handling. So now let's try to animate the progress bar whenever the button is clicked. So let's just change the duration back to just 1 second. And we're going to say top right dot animate 0 and hit save. Now you can see that top right is not defined. That's because it's defined here under mounted, but our methods can't actually refer to it. So what we're going to have to do is actually pull everything right out. So you're going to have bottom right, null, bottom left, null, and then top left, null. So instead of defining local variables, what we can do is define global variables that we can use. So this dot top right, this dot bottom right, this dot bottom left, and this dot top left. So if we hit save and go back here, again, top right is still not defined. So we need to say this dot top right dot animate. Okay, so now if we hit start, it should start animating the bar. Now for this project, you should change all the arrow functions back to the function, the basic function call, because I think it's messing up with the reference of this dot top right. And once you hit save, you should see no more errors. And when you hit start, you should see that it's animating. Okay, so now that we have the button linked to the animation, let's think about how we can change this from start to pause or resume. So this text right now is hard-coded, but what we can do is just cut it and say something like button text and give it the same property and give it the same value as we did right here. And now we can refer to it and say button text. Hit save. You should see that everything is still the same. But now, each time when we click the button, we're going to check that if the button text is equal to start, then we want to change it to pause. And then if the button text is equal to pause, we want to change it to resume. When we hit save and go back here, you can see that it's working, but once we hit resume, it's stuck. So resume should actually go back to pause, and that's where we can create another condition where we check that if it's equal to resume, we want it to go back to pause again. So now we can finally just pause and resume everything. Okay, so now that the text can change, let's actually create a function called animate bar. And this is going to be called right after the text of the button is actually changed. And in here, we're going to check which segment we're in right now, and then animate that bar accordingly. So we're going to need a way of keeping track with the current segment. So let's just create a property for that, and we're going to say that it's set to 1. And in here, we can do a switch. This dot current segment, and then case 1. We want to animate the top right segment, and we're going to animate it to 0. And then we're going to say break. Now let's do the same thing for all of the other case. So this dot bottom right dot animate 0 and break. And let's just copy and paste this. And I'm going to change it to case 3. This is going to be bottom left, and case 4 is going to be top left. Now if we hit save, it should animate according to the current segment. So if we hit start, it's going to animate the first one, but let's just say we are on the third segment and we hit save, it should animate the third one. Okay, so right now we have the animation working, but the time display is still static, right? We have to make sure that it changes accordingly, and we have to make sure that the animation is actually according to this time. So what we can do is create an interval, and this is going to be null for now, but under here, we're going to refer to that interval, and we're going to say set interval. And what this does is that it's going to run a function every 1000 millisecond. And what we're going to do is going to say this dot current time in seconds minus equal 1. Now if we save this and we hit start, we can see that it's actually counting down. But again, the timer and the animation is not in sync. So what we should do is refer to Pomodoro duration times 60 and then times 1000. So since both of these have to times 60, we might as well just do it right here, and then we can delete it from both of these. Now we hit save, and let's change it to half a minute for now. No, changed my mind. Let's make it 6 seconds. And now let's go back. And if we hit start, it should take exactly 6 seconds to go all the way down to 0. But now we face another issue where it's going negative. And the way we can solve that is just to make sure that every time the animation is completed, we want it to clear the interval. So we can actually pass a callback function for Progressbar.JS to run every time the animation is complete. And let's just call it onFinish. So on finish, we want to clear the interval, and that interval is called this.interval. Now we can pass it in here, this.onFinish, and copy and paste it for all 4 of our animations. We're going to hit save, and now it should stop at 0. Okay, so the countdown stopped, but it didn't stop at 0, it stopped at 1. So we can see that there are still a few issues that we need to iron out. But for now, we're going to stop right here. And that's because this video is already getting pretty lengthy. But I want you guys to think about why this issue is happening and what we can do to solve this problem. Now, obviously, the code on my GitHub is already complete. But before you guys actually refer to that, I want you guys to try it out for yourself and try to solve this problem. If you guys can't figure it out, feel free to wait for the next video and we'll go through it together. Now I know that this episode was pretty lengthy, and that's because I wanted it to be easy for beginners to follow along, but I promise that in the next video, we're going to pick up the pace because we have everything set up now, and we're going to implement way more logic. We're going to have sound effects, we're going to improve the user experience, and we're going to make sure that, or most importantly, the timer can actually hit 0. Okay, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.